Good morning, everyone. I am Julie Rowine, President of the League of Women Voters of Concord Carlisle. On behalf of our league, I would like to welcome you all to this last meeting of our First Friday series before our summer hiatus. But fear not, we will return in the fall with more fascinating topics and speakers, and we hope you will rejoin us then. This morning's talk, we will be hearing an update on the work of the Capital Planning Task Force from Elise Woodward. Since our founding in 1920, the League of Women Voters has worked to foster civic engagement and enhance access to voting. The League is a nonpartisan organization and does not support or oppose any candidate or political party. This morning's program is being recorded, as you just heard, and will be available on our website and through Minuteman Media Network. I will now turn the meeting over to Diane Proctor, who is the chair of the LWVCC Concord Town Government Committee, which organizes this First Friday series. Diane?
Thank you, Julie, and good morning to everyone. We are privileged today to have a woman who has been, for me, a model of how to interact in a town, how to grow with a town, how to learn from town and town citizens, and that is Elise Woodward. She was the chair of the Envision Concord, an exquisite chair of the Envision Concord 2030 program, which has given us as a town a sense of how to make decisions, how to be committed to certain things. And it's governed over and over again. You hear it in various committees saying, well, that's something Envision Concord encouraged. And so it has had an influence on town policy that is broad and wide. She has also she was also on the board of the Umbrella, and as an architect helped them to think through the expansion and the development of the new exquisite Umbrella building. She has been the chair this year, and maybe a little bit longer, of the library's sustainability committee, and she has chaired this year the Capital Planning Task Force. Among her many recognitions, she is this year's Citizen of the Year. I would say she may be the Citizen of the Decade. It is a privilege to introduce Elise. She's going to be talking with us about the work of the Capital Planning Task Force. We will ask everybody to put questions in the chat box if you have them, but don't worry, we'll have plenty of time to ask questions after her presentation. Thank you, Elise, and welcome.
Diane, thank you so much for such a generous introduction. And of course, I feel I know you all, and I'm just so delighted to have the opportunity to share the work of the Capital Planning Task Force with the League. I know it's an interest of this organization, and we appreciate your input. I'll be sharing my screen. She said, hopefully. Very visible to everyone?
Perfect.
All right, thanks. So the Capital Planning Task Force met with the Select Board last Monday, June 7th, to present these recommendations. These recommendations were approved at our April 14th meeting of the task force. And I'm looking forward to having a discussion with this group at the conclusion of the presentation. It really has been a pleasure to be a part of this task force. You can see the members here. And the task force is very appreciative of the public's participation and support for our work. We tried hard to listen to the input we received and to incorporate the best thinking and practices into our recommendations. Just briefly, I hope to talk with you today. I'll give you a little background and information about the charge from the Select Board, some of the options we considered, importantly, what we heard from citizens, then the recommendations that we presented to the Select Board before we open it for discussion. And please add your questions to the chat as we move along. The select board established the capital planning task force to develop a process for townwide planning that would be used to develop a capital plan with a 10-year time horizon that would be updated annually. Its purpose was to address the issues that are shown here. And I believe that we have followed the charge rather strictly. The charge was informed from input from the Finance Committee, which anticipated the potential of a number of large capital projects that would need to be funded by debt exclusion to Proposition 2.5. It was also informed by the fiscal planning recommendations of the Envision Concord 2030, the comprehensive long-range plan that Diane mentioned. Part of the work that the task force undertook was to confirm the authority of the town manager in the town charter for capital planning. We reviewed best practices from Massachusetts Municipal Association and other towns. We considered the advantages and disadvantages of a standing capital planning committee versus enhancing the existing process. We collected public comment and we considered several options. The three most prominent options that we considered are shown here. Essentially, the options focused on keeping the current process, creating a new standing committee to advise the town manager on long-term capital planning, and to enhance the current process to solve some of the issues that were addressed on the earlier slide. Ultimately, the task force concluded that the commitment on the part of the town and school leadership to proactively plan to meet future needs without an additional committee would deliver the desired results. So the process we recommend will support Concord's sustainability principles, evaluate and coordinate projects to try to meet multiple objectives with each investment, and strengthen citizen access and input to the planning process. Public input was very important to the work of the task force, as I mentioned. Many residents attended our meetings and our public forum, offered many useful comments during our work. I would just say, as an aside, the commitment of these citizens to our community, their genuine interest and knowledge and attention to detail has been remarkable and inspiring and very helpful to this committee. Much of the public comment was supportive of the task force efforts. The general categories of comments we received are listed here. Many of the comments from citizens advocated for a new standing capital planning committee, as did the League of Women Voters. And the task force considered this information. However, we concluded that the essence of the challenge for capital planning in Concord is not the governance structure. Rather, it is and it has been the challenge to manage citizens' tax burdens for fiscal sustainability and to predictably balance meeting future needs while estimating debt over time. So that is identifying and describing future projects in advance of those projects being sequenced for implementation. The task force determined that the authority and responsibility for these fiscal recommendations rests with the leadership of the town and schools and requires focused input from the public throughout the process. So these are our recommendations, our specific recommendations. We recommend that a long-term capital planning process for very large projects, which we also call Tier 3 projects, be adopted by the select board and the school committee and incorporate these elements. A long-term capital plan that's updated on an annual basis, that includes all projects, a project evaluation criteria for each project, a specific process to create and update the long-term capital plan annually, and a specific timetable for presentation of the long-term capital plan in public forums to encourage input from citizens. And you will see that our recommendation about the timetable includes several public forums each year. The second recommendation is to define a very large project as any project exceeding a cost of $5 million or a project that has 2 or more phases totaling $5 million. Recommendation number 3 is that these recommendations, this process be formally integrated into the current town and school policies. And that the capital planning intend to create a 10-year capital plan with debt capacity analysis, which would be especially useful to the Finance Committee as they prepare their 5-year tax projections. We recommend that a debt template be designed to summarize and present these Tier 3 projects to analyze the impact on taxpayers, allow for potential sequencing of projects, and for updating annually. And our report shows a couple of sample templates in Appendix E. And additionally, finally, we recommend that annually the Integrated Town and School Tier 3 project list be available for citizen input, and that those projects show the priorities of the project, the climate criteria evaluation, potential project timing, and debt sequencing with that timing. In addition to the recommendations, the report has detailed information about the commitment to the integrated decision-making between town and schools, more information on evaluating and prioritizing projects, on sequencing debt, details on the annual timeline, and on the more visible and formally designed public process, as well as some suggestions for putting recommendations into action. This slide shows some of the recommended criteria. We highlighted the importance of objective criteria for evaluating projects and determining the appropriate sequence to meet the community's needs. We recommend that every Tier 3 project be evaluated using project evaluation criteria such as these that relate to the financial impact to Concord, its residents, and its businesses, that identify the potential to improve operational efficiencies, including stakeholders in the planning process, and also evaluating the projects relative to climate change, vulnerability of capital assets such as drinking water, wastewater systems, communication, utility systems, our buildings, our facilities, and other structures. This is an illustration of the sample debt template. It is illegible, I know, I apologize for that. But an important aspect of the 10-year capital plan will be the integration of priorities for capital improvements across all town and school departmental needs. So a systems approach, if you will. The long-term capital planning needs to be supported by debt capacity analysis to consider the maximum amount of spending that's necessary to meet community needs and yet maintain a fiscal stability for citizens. So as we all know, capital planning is an iterative process. An annual update of the long-term capital plan should update the project information from the previous year's plan and continue identifying new information about non-building infrastructure as well as strategic land parcels and buildings for potential municipal purchase and use. The two sample templates that we show include a recommended sequencing of projects, a checkbox for whether the criteria has been evaluated, and the estimated total project cost, as well as the estimated annual cost of the debt service. So in our report, you would see a projected tax impact of Tier 3 projects and an estimated debt service payment for Tier 3 projects. And you can see the x-axis here takes us out 10 years. We also recommended that an interactive tax impact collector be included on the town's website so that an individual could test the changes to their taxes with the anticipated debt sequence. So relative to the time frame, we intend for the timeline to be a regular and predictable annual pattern with multiple opportunities for public input each year. We also recommend that these these recommendations be implemented immediately so that the process can begin in September. So this slide describes the timeline that we're recommending, that after town meeting, the town and school leadership update the long-term capital plan. This year, they would be creating the long-term capital plan. These months are shown as placeholders. What's important to the capital planning task force is that it be a predictable process and it happen annually. We're not attached to these particular months necessarily, but these this sequence would mesh the capital planning process with the annual budget process. And we believe that that is the best opportunity to receive public comment. It is predictable for the citizens, and they're already used to showing up for to learn about the budget process in these meetings. So in September, a joint meeting of the select board and school committee would present the draft long-term capital plan and take public comment at the meeting and in 30 or 45 days following the meeting. In November, the town manager and school superintendent would present the long-term capital plan to the finance committee and focus on the long-range impact to town finances and residents, again, for public comment. And in December, a joint meeting of the select board and school committee would discuss and ultimately approve with public comment the revised long-term capital plan. And that would be the time to incorporate specific spending into the warrant, should there be any required that year. So in summary, the recommendations of this task force are intended to establish a framework for systematic fiscal planning, to strengthen the responsibility and leadership of the town and school, to meet multiple objectives with each investment, to maintain the town's high quality facilities, to improve community sustainability, and to balance citizens' values and tax burdens. So the members of the task force invited the select board and school committee to discuss these recommendations and take public comment. And then after receiving public input, we recommended that the recommendations or a modified version be adopted formally and immediate steps taken to integrate the recommendations into town and school processes for capital planning, beginning in the September of 2021. So an important lesson that we learned from the 2003 effort to develop a long-term capital plan for Concord was that the process recommendations were not adopted. So the individual projects that were anticipated in that plan were eventually completed, which were the reconstruction of our schools. But no process was put in place to ensure that the plan would be updated on a regular basis, or that the projects would be sequenced in a predictable timeframe. Instead, the planning for all the capital projects continued with the respective town and school budget processes, with no integrated process to for very large projects. So in addition to a new middle school, potential large projects may include development of the 2229 Main Street site and major work on the Public Works complex, the Public Safety complex, the townhouse, and the West Concord Fire Station. The time frame for implementing these projects and others has not been determined, but the needs appear to exist at the present time, and that it's probably not a comprehensive list. In addition, there may likely be opportunities for land acquisition as envisioned in and aligned with the comprehensive long-range plan. So we really recommend that that these recommendations be implemented and trialed in the coming year so that refinements can be identified to improve the capital planning process for the next decade. And again, our the significant recommendation in this report is to have a predictable process for public input. So thank you very much for allowing me to present to you, and I'd be happy to talk it over, and I'll stop sharing my screen so we can see each other.
Thank you, Elise, so much. As the moderator of this event, I will take the privilege of asking a few questions first, and then we've got some wonderful questions in the chat box. Let's do something practical, Elise. If citizens want to read your very comprehensive and incidentally rather long report from the Capital Planning Task Force, what do they put in a box on the town website to bring that up? How do they
Very good question. I do not know the answer to that. So we presented the report to the select board, and I believe it is the responsibility of the select board to put the report to make it available. But honestly, Diane, I haven't gone to our task force website to see whether in fact it is available there, but I'll look into that and let you know.
Thank you. That would be terrific, because I think it's important for people to be able to gain access to the details of that report, which actually are impressive. And it gives a sense for the thoughtfulness and thoroughness of the work that your committee did.
We tried to make it succinct.
Right. Well, you
said it's long.
Almost, well, it's over 100 pages, I think.
Oh, with the appendices, yeah.
With the appendices, yeah. Right. The select board has accepted your proposal, or voted to accept it on June 7th. But does this proposal need a town vote? Will it become an article in a warrant in the future, or is it merely being accepted by the select board and therefore, because of that, endorsed?
So I think there is a nuance between acceptance and endorsement.
Okay.
So I would tell you that the select board accepted our report, which we appreciated because fundamentally that closes the work of the task force. But my expectation is that the select board will discuss these recommendations and I hope take public comment and discuss them with the school committee and then implement them or develop a process. And there are a number of ways that the select board could implement that. They could just include them in an APP, one of the acknowledged processes that by which the public bodies operate, the select board especially, but it does not require a town vote in any event. And even if we had recommended a new committee, that would not have required a town vote. That would simply have been the select board establishing a committee and then populating it.
Thank you. It's one thing to think of public involvement in a project. It's another thing to be presented with a project in its whole form, with an opportunity for comment. And one of the advantages of an independent, and I'd like to underscore that word for a minute, one of the advantages of an independent committee apart from the town or the schools is that you have a body that can look at a plan from a perspective that is perhaps more citizen-oriented than it is a reflection of the, and I don't want to use the word ambitions of the town, I just did, of the town or the schools, but the desire of the town or the schools. In your deliberations and in your conversations, how did you deal with that, the particular need for that kind of independence?
So in looking at the recommendations of the Mass Municipal Association and in speaking with members of other communities, which generally incorporated either a capital planning committee or a capital expenditure committee, in most of those towns, the creation of those committees was required by the charter. That is a distinct difference from Concord's governance structure. In every case, those committees were advisory to the town manager or the select board or the other entities in town. So, it's I understand your the interest in having a group look at projects that don't have any ties to the various departmental structures in the town and school. But in the end, there is not a mechanism for having an independent group do that. And neither is it possible, did it seem possible that an independent group would be able to collect all of the financial data and departmental data for full analysis of needs. So we considered that that there would be some redundancy in having a standing committee that would essentially need to collect all the information that the town and schools hold, and then pass it to the committee for their consideration. So it's a little, it's nuanced. I think it's important to acknowledge that the template of projects would show projects that are not fully baked. They are ideas, essentially, concepts for projects that the town and schools would need in order to meet the municipal needs that have been identified either through a facility assessment, a municipal facility assessment of municipal buildings, or whether they're needed because of citizen interest and request, whether they're needed for improving operational efficiency and reducing energy use, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So I think that the projects that would show on a 10-year capital plan would be ideas. They would have an estimated cost attached to them, but they would have essentially no details about the size of the project, what the program would be, where it would, the site perhaps. So there would be many assumptions made in estimating the cost of those projects. That template would primarily be used to sequence the projects in different ways, so that you could say, well, the project number 3, we thought it would start in 8 years, but in fact, we really don't need that until 15 years out. And so we could have the debt capacity to move another project in. And that could be, that debt capacity analysis could be made with those templates.
Thank you, Elise. One last question from the moderator, and that is, you mentioned 2 projects that are very much on everybody's mind, 2229 Main Street and then others. But Peabody School was also not on that list. And I know it's there in your mind, it just wasn't on the list that you suggested. I think the League is concerned about who makes the decisions about how to use 229 Main Street. Who makes the decisions about how to develop, sell, whatever happens to the Peabody school once it is, when it was actually no longer in use in any way. How did your committee look at that particular concern?
So our committee was not charged to look at any specific project. We were charged to develop a process, and
it's about the process of that. I mentioned 2 in specific that about which we're following very carefully. But yeah.
So I think that the development opportunities for 2229 Main Street fundamentally, I believe, will be a community decision. I think it will be a town meeting decision.
Okay.
And I think it will be heavily influenced by community input, as well as evaluating the municipal needs that could be met by development of 2229 Main Street. There are many constituents,
Sure are.
have, have an interest in that project. And so, the affordable housing advocates will also, they will have, quite a bit of input on the development of 2229 Main Street, I hope. So that I think will be a community decision and ultimately will require a town meeting vote.
Okay.
The Peabody School, not positive how that decision will be made. That may be if it were to be sold, I think it might require a town meeting vote that the town and school would make a presentation. I'm not positive about that, but fundamentally that property is a municipal property under the direction of the school committee, I think is the decision-making tier. We had an insightful question, I think, from the select board at our meeting Monday night about how a sale of the Peabody School or an asset, revenue generation would fit into our template. And I don't think we had a mechanism, to show assets. We do, our report does discuss projects that may have revenue positive components for the town, but we didn't really look at the, selling off municipal land to be, or projects to be buildings to defray debt. We did not look at that. So that might also be a town meeting vote.
Thank you, Elise. Let's go to the chat box, and then maybe we could put everybody's faces up, Peggy, and give people a chance to ask questions as we move along. Elise, this has been so helpful.
Great, thanks.
Okay, here we go.
Ready for the first one, Diane?
Ready for the first one.
Okay. I'm just going to take from the top. We've had a couple really good questions here. Does the $5 million project threshold amount indicate the amount for the total project or just the cost to the town or school district?
We anticipated that that $5 million threshold would be the minimum cost of the project that would be defined as a tier 3 project. And why did we choose $5 million? Well, we didn't just throw numbers out of a hat, but Carrie LaFleur was a member of our task force, and it was her recommendation that it would be very unusual to be able to fund a $5 million project or $5 million or greater, more expensive project without debt exclusion. And so that was how we reached that, that threshold amount.
Okay. All right, the next question I have here, making information available, this is from Dory, making information available to residents is not the same as having a standing committee, which is engaged during the year and throughout the year. Is there any chance of this being reviewed?
I think it is totally up to the select board. So I would say the best chance of getting action on a standing committee would be to let the select board know how you feel about it.
Okay. I see that Julie has posted the link to the report of the Capital Planning Task Force as part of the select board materials. And I just now checked on the Capital Planning Force website. It is not posted there. So I appreciate the work to get it posted up there. And I see that Terry has made a comment about getting it posted up there too. So that's.
Yeah. Thank you all for doing my homework for me.
It's not your homework. It's our collective work.
We just like to double check on stuff. That's just
I appreciate it.
Right. Here's a question that is actually for me. Who's responsible for updating that template?
That would be the town and schools. So likely the finance director of the town and the schools would update that template.
Okay, the finance director. I wasn't sure how that was clarified on that. All right.
I see that Marge has raised her hand.
Okay.
Marge, you have to unmute, and I'm going to buy everybody a T-shirt that says, please unmute. I think we all need one.
This took me a second to reach it. What I'm concerned about is, I think that, frankly, I think there should be a standing committee. And I see no reason why that isn't consistent with anything in the charter. I believe it only takes a bylaw passage to request that all requests that go through, that come from the administration to the town manager be also shared with a standing committee, which could be a capital expenditures committee. And I see no reason why a bylaw change cannot be instituted just through the regular warrant. I think it's very important that a capital expenditures committee be considered a watchdog for all capital spending, not just tier 3. I think it should be a watchdog, as the finance committee is, to the town meeting. That is what is important. And it's not clear to me that this committee that you have picked out as the operative one is reporting on other capital expenditures of sizable amounts, anywhere from 50,000 to some million. And that is cumulative. And currently it's being dealt with piecemeal and not in a coherent total vision of what the total capital plans, what the total capital spending for certain plans. And so we just get, a little bit this year and a little bit next year, but there's nobody that's looking at the big picture of how much is being spent each time on a certain project. I feel very strongly that a standing committee is needed as a watchdog of citizens, just as the finance committee is reporting to the town meeting. And such a standing committee would also do.
So that's very eloquently stated.
Sure
Thank
is.
you. And I'd just like to be clear that the Capital Planning Task Force Committee was only charged to look at these very large projects, because all of the other capital investments are made through the budget process. And so you're exactly right that for most other municipalities that have capital expenditure committees or capital planning committees, they're looking at all capital expenditures. And that is not what we were asked to do. So I think that that's, that I would encourage you to take that information to the select board.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Marge, that's a beautifully articulated comment, and it reflects so much of what the reason the league hoped that there would be eventually an independent capital standing task force. Carlin, there are other questions, I believe, in the chat.
Yes, here's another one. Does this process consider whether a project is partnering with private organizations? This person, it's Peggy, was wondering about the CCHS fields where the bathroom expenses were not covered by promised private money. And as a follow-up on that, the school district is now considering spending capital money to deal with the activity room, the convenience rooms.
So this, our report does not specifically address public-private partnerships, but there's no reason that a public-private partnership could not be analyzed and from the same debt capacity analysis in the long-term capital plan, because there would be a public component of cost for a P3 project, even though there would be other supporters of that. So we don't specifically address it.
Can I do one quick follow-up of my own? What you're showing me, Elise, is that it is critical for this kind of a report, not just the process of doing the report, but in the formation of the committee for the report. So in order to have an input on how the process goes, you really have to start at the very beginning when the charge occurs. Would you agree?
Yes, I would agree that the way the specific language of a charge, just like the specific language of a request for proposal or design of a project, that's where the action is. So if you want your project to have, excellent energy performance, it sure better show in the RFP that you want that. It's awfully hard to add it later. So the question of our report includes an appendix, I think, Diane, that describes the way what we call tier 1 and tier 2 projects are currently funded. It describes the existing budget process for tier 1 and tier 2 projects. But we did not consider all of those, as Marge says, incremental capital expenditures. And of course, a growing entity has annual capital expenditures in order to maintain, never mind, innovate. So I think that is the question of how all capital expenditures are analyzed and considered in Concord was not addressed by this.
Okay, that's it that I have for chat questions, Diane.
Thank you so much. Elise, I wonder if since I see no other questions, I just want to make sure, it's hard to see without a.
Diane?
Terry has a question, I think, or a comment. Terry?
Right. I wanted to make a number of comments. First, a huge thank you to Elise. It was herding cats on our committee. We had a wide variety of opinions. We had a lot of input from the League of Women Voters and other citizens and the Finance Committee, and we really thank everybody who sent in your comments and attended our meetings. I agree with Elise. I have a number of comments responding to some of these questions. Elise explained the difference between that the select board has accepted the report. But our next step now will be to discuss and adopt, hopefully, some or all of the recommendations. And that will be done at a public meeting. And we invite all of your questions, all of your participation at that meeting. In fact, we might be doing in the future what we're calling a focused meeting. And one focused meeting might be just on the 2229 Main Street. One might be just on how to fund the middle school with some alternative revenues, such as Peabody and some other things that have been mentioned. One might be on the capital planning task force recommendations. Just a meeting just to discuss that. I don't know yet, so stay tuned. But these are some things that really need some focus by the select board. And they would be public meetings where we would certainly want citizen input.
And Terry, may I say that for those who maybe don't know, that Terry will be the chair of the select board this next fiscal year after the town meeting.
Well, we haven't had that vote yet, so.
Oh, I thought that had been decided. Okay.
We will be voting at our town meeting is this Sunday, and then our next meeting is June 21st. And on that day, we will vote new officers.
Okay.
Diane, David Allen also has his hand up.
I see that, and I'm letting Terry has some more questions.
Yeah, if I can just finish, thanks. Okay, we do not, I just texted and got back that the best link to the report is still the one that was in the chat box from our select board meeting the other day. The staff, excuse me, has not yet posted it permanently, but I've sent them a reminder to please post it permanently on the town website. And then regarding Marge's question about
Thank you, Terry, so much. David Allen.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It has come out here how the charge in this case meant the focus was entirely on the large capital projects. Terry, of course, has now just covered reasons why that was so, but I think pretty clearly that is the stepping stone to go back to the select board and say, you know what, I think we need a further look here. Let me offer a perspective, one I've actually had for some years and may even have been heard on the subject. No self-respecting, well-run corporation would fail to have a capital planning committee on its board. I honestly think it's an embarrassment that we don't. I think we may threaten our AAA bond rating for failing to do something like that. Of course, we're not a corporation. We are, what, order of magnitude, 50 million, not small, not even slightly small. What are the reasons why this matters? Well, Marge has brought it out, but let's just say it out loud. We've gotten a lot of freebies like White Pond, and others could mention others that turned out to actually involve a lot of expenditure going down the road. And those in town for whom it's a real strain when tax rate goes up, it makes a huge difference. Let me notice that if we were to move in the direction of something like capital planning task force, and I, of course, abjectly apologize that my own schedule prevented my hearing, and I will go back and review the video so I can hear the presentation on this. But let me notice that we've got a complex situation in which, instead of having a board of directors where there's a capital planning task force, governance is actually in the hands of the citizens. The administration, the town manager, and the staff, and the superintendent, and all that, they work for those citizens. How you organize something like that so that you actually do get a decent capital planning process, and there is transparency and can be seen, and there can be feedback from those who can't pay, means you have to work at it. But it could also mean that you don't have to have an adversarial process. In fact, for something like this to work well would mean there would be fairly tight integration between some sort of citizen-based capital planning task force forgive me, capital committee sort of organization. There'd have to be integration so that there, of course, was information flowing from operations and looking out. I hope we'll consider going back and inviting the select board to take a further look at this. As I said, it's very hard to imagine being well run if we don't do this in a workable fashion. As complex as it is, when you don't have a board of directors, what you got are citizens, the governors, and for goodness sake, all this division amongst the various actors. We need it, and we need not to have those surprises oh my goodness, that free thing we got in White Pine, whoops, and so forth. It's going to be ongoing down the road. Sorry for going on. Hope it's useful. Thanks again. And thanks, for goodness sake, as Terry said, for hurting those cats. It obviously was extraordinarily well done.
Thank you, David, for that comment. I think, Elise, you're beginning to hear a point of view about the importance of perhaps an independent eye on expenditures. The FinCom, one could argue, serves such a purpose, but the amount of work they have to do without also looking at these other things would argue for a supplementary committee to serve as a watchdog, because of course FinCom is. There's another aspect of this that, Elise, I wish you would address in the abstract now rather than in the particular. FinCom is only an advisory group, as a committee observing capital planning would be as well. What happens when, and play through just for a minute a scenario, what would happen if there were an independent task force, independent group to watch capital development and FinCom, and they both came back and said, we think that we're not ready to undertake these expenditures. Is the only thing they have is the voice of concern. Do we have to then, would a special warrant issue have to be put up so that we could bring such a concern to the citizens? How could we imagine, or how can we imagine such a governing process?
You're asking me to speculate, Diane.
Oh, I understand that. I'm just...
Should there be a capital planning or expenditure committee for all capital expenditures is a different question from the question that our task force considered.
Which is just tier 3, right?
Which is just tier 3. And I think the reason the charge was written that way was because the capital expenditures that we currently deal with on an annual basis are built into our budgets, and they do not require a debt exclusion vote.
Exactly.
So the concern was that just like the concern 20 years ago about redoing all of the school properties, that this series of projects, just like the series of projects that are kind of on the horizon or may be anticipated now, would each likely require a debt exclusion vote. And how should we think about a process to anticipate that, manage that, or possibly anticipate the needs in such a way that those needs could be combined into one project instead of multiple projects? So that was the process we considered, primarily to consider a sequence of future debt exclusion votes.
Thank you. I know my question was both vague and abstract, but I think that sometimes the best planning comes from asking that kind of question or setting up that kind of scenario. Terry, I think you have a response?
Yes, I agree with Elise, and I just want to add, I also was thinking along the same lines as you, Diane, and brought that to the select board. And I was reminded, we have 3 types of capital projects, which our group ended up calling tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. So I'll just very briefly go over what that is. Tier 1, Elise is correct. Those are in the budgets. Town meeting every year is voting. When you vote the police budget, you're voting how many cruisers there are, for example, or in the public works budget or in the school budget, you're voting and all of that. These are items that are in the operating budget, tier 1. So town meeting can look at the detail in the school budget book or the town budget book, and you can ask all kinds of questions. The finance committee also can ask all kinds of, so those are very public. Tier 2 is the next one. Tier 2 are big enough that they require separate articles. Like if you recall, when we purchased the Giroux land,
Just going to use that example. Yeah.
just for the Giroux land. And I see Dory nodding. I'm going to get back to Giroux in a minute. When something is big enough, like maybe $1 million, or Balls Hill Road is another one, a big project, those are a separate article. And again, town meeting is going to vet that. That's what town meeting is all about. All the preparation for town meeting. The projects that didn't have enough vetting, we felt, were the very big projects that are the tier 3, and that was our charge. And again, I'm looking for the link, and I will send it out. I know it's in the town manager's book and in the finance committee book, and I want to find the exact link and send it to Julie. That lists all of those projects. And then just to finish up about Giroux, the league was very active in calling to our attention 2 projects, White Pond and Giroux, which were originally standalone articles in tier 2 for 1 or 2 million. But then there was a phase 2 and a phase 3. And so that is why our tier 3 includes the total of 5 million or more, even if it's phased. So if we get another project of that scope, where there's 2, 3, 4 phases and the total will be more than 5 million, it will be included in the tier 3. So I hope that helps clarify our thinking.
That's fantastic, Terry. Thank you so much. David, do you have a comment that you'd like to add to this?
Diane, could I follow up on that?
Of course, Ingrid. I didn't see your hand. I apologize. Pop right in.
Sorry. Well, I think that's, but I think that's the point that some of us are trying to make, and that is that a so-called tier 2 project has ended up being a tier 3 project, because in the beginning, it was not fully disclosed what was planned, what was intended, and what would be needed in terms of budgeting and money. It was not a fully thought out plan. And I think that's part of what the league has been concerned about, is that there has not been a good communication about various projects, and what was innocently said, oh, this is going to be a wonderful opportunity for those living in I'm sorry, I don't want to be sarcastic, but for people living in West Concord to have a wonderful new recreational facility and opportunity, et cetera. And I can clearly remember that. White Pond is a little bit less clear, because it was a gift and there was a feeling of urgency that we needed to act on this because the opportunity came up. So that's my comment on that specifically, but I would like some clarification. And I'm sorry I came in late. I've got 3 different meetings this morning that I'm trying to be part of. By virtue of the select board accepting the report, does that mean that the option of a permanent standing committee is off the table?
No, that means that the select board accepted the report of this task force. And by doing that, they concluded the work of this task force. But the select board has not endorsed the recommendations, nor have they taken any action to implement the recommendations. So, and I think we heard Terry say that when the select board convenes after town meeting, maybe June 21st or thereafter, she anticipates that they would have begin conversations about whether or how to implement these recommendations or modification to them. So every opportunity exists to make your comments directly to the select board as they are in the process of this.
Ingrid,
So
I'm
I'd
here-
just like to say, oh, excuse me, yeah.
I was just going to
No.
say, Elise used language that with which I was unfamiliar, which is you can accept something, but that doesn't mean an endorsement. And the
Okay.
endorsement moves forward, and that distinction has been very clarifying and helpful.
Yeah, so that means that there would still be an opportunity for the league to lobby, so to speak.
Exactly.
Yes.
You can
Okay.
Yes.
to advocate, right?
Advocate.
Yes. So, Ingrid, you raise an important point, and that is, how do we as a community foresee the future? So with every project that comes along, we have a set of information that is today's data. We have current needs. We know, maybe we know the site of a facility investment, maybe we don't, but we have incomplete information about what the community will need or how the implementation to meet that need will be carried out. And so it is by and collectively anticipating all of the components of a project. So the Giroux project and the White Pond project in some degrees are opportunistic projects. They're gifts to the town, or they're an opportunity to purchase land that has a very finite, fast moving window. We need to act quickly. So the town's ability to clearly scope everything that will be needed for that project at its end date is challenged by time frame and challenged by details. So I think that the best opportunity is to implement a clear cost estimating scenario where there's an opportunity for public input and for the responsible parties to actually imagine everything that we could possibly need at Giroux. Like, well, will we need a picnic stand? Will we need a covered area for people to gather during the rain? So all of those components that ended up being in subsequent iterative projects to make that original concept a whole were not known at the beginning. And that fundamentally is a challenge for every capital investment.
Thank you, Elise. I would say that a particular concern was besides you hit the two that have been the focus, Giroux and White Pond. With White Pond, I think there actually was more information among the people who live out there that there were accumulating problems, and I'm not sure that we took the opportunity when presenting, let's get this free gift to the town, to say to the public, yes, indeed, this is free in one sense, but we will have to undertake responsibilities. And here are some of the responsibilities we anticipate. It's that kind of clarity of comment that I think causes less anxiety and greater ease among the citizenry as they're beginning to endorse something. And I've only in retrospect do I realize how much was known about that. So David, did you have a comment?
This immediate conversation, very helpful to get to what perhaps is a useful distinction that's almost a given in the DNA of a business operation of a company, which is the difference between operational and capital. Of course, companies also can't see the future beyond a year usefully. In fact, human beings have serious trouble, frankly, looking so far out. But it's precisely why you make this distinction between operation and capital. Of course, it's reflected in the generally accepted accounting principles as well. We hear it could be instantiated. The FinCom could be operational. You could have a capital committee, which, as you hear, I'm very hopeful of eventually get to. That would look at the capital side of things. governments particularly have not done very well. If you look, I happen to have had a reason to do so, having, as I've divulged, been a part of City of Boston, Kevin White's financial operation 50 years ago. You know, look at all, even a few weeks out, forget about a year or so. We'd be advantaged, I believe, if we would institute this sort of thing, as complicated as it would be to do in a government where you've got the separation of citizens and the administration. I hope we'll.
Thank you, David, for this, for summarizing that point of view. Elise, can you move us for just a minute? We have about just under 20 minutes to look at some of the work. Make sure there are no other questions having to do with this presentation. I don't see any raised hands or waving of hands. And Carlin, is there anything else in the chat box that requires articulation? Okay.
No, not that I can see. You're clear.
Okay. If you could move us to some of the work you've been doing in the library in terms of sustainability. But before you do that, I just wanted to tell you that I heard the other day something that I think is pretty amazing. If you want to make God laugh, have a plan. We've all, for the last year and a half, thought we had plans, and everything has been turned upside down by this invisible little virus. So I think, and that manifests itself obviously tangibly. So I mean, I think that we can all acknowledge the complexity of planning ahead. So Elise, thank you for talking with us about the library now.
All right, I'll share my screen, and I have a few brief slides maybe here. Is that visible?
Yes, perfect.
All right. So just a brief overview of the Library Corporation Sustainability Plan. This is the Sustainability Committee. Again, quite a fun group to work with. The corporation engaged Greener You, which is an environmental consulting firm that focuses primarily on educational and community institutions to help them develop their approach to sustainability and mitigating climate change. They were an excellent consultant, one of the best I've ever worked with. The corporation had these planning goals. They wanted to create an implementable 5-year plan within a 10-year vision for sustainability. They wanted their plan to align with the town sustainable Concord plan and the long-term planning at the Concord Free Public Library. And they wanted to engage the community or their input. So this is the vision that we recommended. By 2030, the library will serve as both a living example of sustainable operations and net zero buildings, and as a community hub to educate, inspire, and support the Concord community in creating a more sustainable future. This is the library's 10-year vision for sustainability. The 5-year implementable plan is the first, the first component of this. There are 8 goals, and there are strategies that support each goal. So this is a quick overview. The first 4 goals are in the outreach and education arena. There are goals for the library to be a living laboratory, to have strong, sustainable educational resources, to offer programming to patrons of all ages about climate change and sustainability platforms, and also leadership. So, and in part, this leadership goal is one of the driving notions behind the sustainability plan, that the library will demonstrate sustainability and climate action leadership in the community and with metrics for consistent improvement. There are 4 goals within the built environment and operations. There's a building goal, moving the library buildings to be carbon neutral by 2030. There's a grounds goal for the library grounds and landscaping to demonstrate resilience for the community. This is both campuses, Fowler and the main campus. A materials goal for the library materials and resource system to use zero waste principles, and a mobility goal to support sustainable transportation options. So again, there are strategies that support each goal. And I think this plan is available on the corporation website. These are kind of the key planning milestones. This committee started work in August of 2020. We met virtually. We never met in person. And we had several community reviews, and the plan has been presented, reviewed by the community and the select board, and presented to the trustees for their endorsement. This is a brief summary of the feedback we received from the community review. And in February, there was a second community review in early May. You can see we had a good response, good number of attendees, good response for questions with responses. Those questions and responses are also available on the corporation website. And now the plan is, it's been accepted by the trustees, and it's being, I would say it's been endorsed by the trustees, and it's being designed. So this is a preview of the way the plan will look. It will not be a Word document, it'll be an InDesign document. And I believe this is going to be sent to the trustees for their final approval later this month. Yeah, so happy to talk about this with, stop my share. So it was a recommendation of the Sustainability Committee that the trustees not print thousands of copies of the sustainability plan, but rather make it available electronically, perhaps with just a few hard copies in the libraries for public review.
Elise, having read that and listened to these programs, it's very exciting. Can you give us an example of one way in which you believe the sustainability program will be reflected as the library continues to be open and continues to expand?
Could I ask you to repeat that, please?
Yes. Can you give us one specific example of how the library will be communicating to its citizens active, ongoing sustainability work as it opens and as it expands? Do you know when it will be, the building program will be completed, incidentally?
So,
we have a deadline?
Yeah, so a couple of information points about this. The building will be completed in the fall. I think I believe the gardens will be open in October.
Okay.
So one of the challenges about this plan was that the Library Corporation sort of felt they were doing everything simultaneously: a sustainability plan and a building expansion, and public, was not able to come into the library, and there was a lot of complexity. And so the sustainability plan was intentionally designed to really kick into high gear after the building expansion is open, so that to give the organization the opportunity to be up and running with this sustainable addition and resilient gardens, etc. When they actually started full court press on their sustainability plan. The metrics are of energy use and carbon and that sort of thing are intermingled with the town data collection. So Kate Hanley was a member of this committee, and so it's designed so that the library won't have to collect its own data, because the town is already collecting data on the library, and it's and the way it meshes with the municipal systems, so that that information can be easily highlighted from the town data collection. So my expectation is that that information will probably be available on the website, maybe town website and library website, on an annual basis. Maybe it will turn out to be quarterly, but that to be determined, I think. From the outreach and education standpoint, the library staff is thrilled about having the sustainability initiative. They're really looking forward to providing sustainability programming and to enhancing the current sustainable initiatives that they have, the seed lending library, the library of things. You know, there's a number of sustainable initiatives already in place at the library. And so that will be enhanced really, you know, right away, I think. Is that specific enough?
Yeah, absolutely. I just, you know, these abstract principles are lovely, and I was just trying to look for something, you know, very tangible.
Yeah.
And that the seed program, for one, is very tangible example.
Very tangible.
Yeah.
So I think the library expects that the awareness of the community and the conversation and ideas for action will be shared at the library, that conversation will be intensified over the next 5 years, and that there will be many real world examples, advice, support for the community perfecting its sustainability actions.
Thank you so much. Elise, maybe you could just let us know whether there has been an appointment of a new director of the library yet.
I've not heard that. Caroline Nye is the interim or acting director. I'm not sure of whether she's acting or interim acting or whatever. But anyway, she's hard at work, and my understanding is that there is, you know, a search going on. But honestly, Diane, I don't have the specifics of that. I don't know how wide the search is, or I think it is hoped that a new director will be appointed before the fall, but I don't know whether that's realistic or not.
Okay, thank you. I know it's on people's minds.
Yeah.
So I was curious. Are there other questions for Elise from our community?
Diane, I saw that Di Clymer had her hand up at one point. Now Julie has her hand up too. So you've got a couple things.
Di, you want to start, and then Julie?
I just want to echo what Elise has said as trustee of the library. The library staff is extremely excited about the plan that has evolved, and they're really looking forward to doing programming in the children's garden for the children, in all sorts of ways for adults. We've already, even though this will really be implemented after the expansion and so forth, we've already taken to heart a lot of the information and ideas that have come from the plan in terms of designating different aspects of the gardens that we're going to be creating. We've tweaked a few things. Always in the past, we've been very eager to have native plants in our landscapes, but we've done a little bit more tweaking to enhance that. So I think that it's been really palatable to see the excitement that the staff has had for all of this. Also, to answer your question, Carolyn Nye is acting director at this point, and we do not know. It's going to be a wide search for the new director, And we don't know whether there'll be an interim director or we'll skip that and have a permanent director. But we anticipate from the number of applicants that have applied for the 8 positions that were open, and they were working through that, but that has been outstanding a response. So we're excited about the future.
Guy, thank you for that clarification. That's fantastic. Julie.
Well, I'm going to preface this by saying that as a longtime lover of libraries, since I was a tiny child and my mother took us every week to the library to bring home as many books as we could carry, one of the things that I have loved is the idea of the library institution where people have access to those, not just that the library itself will be sustainable, but you envision it that as part of its sort of role in the community is to serve as a point of education and conversation for the community. And so one of the things that I am thinking about is that, you have 5 years, you have 10 years. We hope that in that time that there will be additional new things that become available to us to think about and talk about. And my thought was that this is not just about making the library environmentally sustainable, but making the library sustainable into the future as a long-term educational center for our community. And I just wondered if, how this sustainability relates to your long-term thoughts about the library as an institution, which of course the corporation must spend a lot of its time worrying about.
That probably is a question for Di. But I will just say that the Sustainability Committee was very alert to these issues, Julie. The overall sustainability of the library as an institution, and the sustainability of the library as as fabric to the community, and that we had a number of conversations about the importance of maintaining high energy at the library as a way to energize, let that energy seep into downtown Concord, because economic vitality in downtown Concord is critically important to our community's well-being over time, to the next decade, the next generation, et cetera. And how the library informs that was a big part of the Sustainability Committee's conversation.
Thank you so much. Di? And
I
then
would just like to add that the Library Corporation really looks at the library as the educational center of this community. We house so many of the documents from all of the other groups in town, all the other nonprofit organizations in our special collections. It's free and open to everyone in the community, all ages and so forth. So it's already perceived in our minds that way. We're very lucky that we have 3 entities that take care of the library. The corporation owns, as you all know, owns the land and the building and the special collections and maintains that and refurbishes it and makes it grow. And then we have the town partnership, and the town takes care, it so beautifully takes care of the staffing and the books and the policies and so forth of the library. And we have the 3rd entity, which is the Friends group. And the Friends do 99.9% of all of our programming. And they are equally excited about the sustainability plans and eager to do more programming in that vein. So we're lucky that we have 3 entities taking care of our precious library.
So Di, thank you for mentioning partnership, because that is a critical concept within the library's 3 partners, but also the partnership between the library and the town. So it is a partnership between the citizens of Concord, the patrons of the library, the town, the three entities of the library that will work together to make the sustainability happen. And so I think that not one of us, can accomplish, not one entity can accomplish anything on its own. So it is a true partnership. And thanks for being in this meeting and adding great content to the conversation. But I'd just like to point out that your virtual background is surely a photograph of the children's garden.
It is.
Or a rendering. Yeah.
It's a envisioned plan. We're using the same landscape architect that we have used for the reading garden at the main library and for the Fowler project, for the expansion of the Fowler project. And she's very excited to have this new dimension of the sustainability planning that you have done, Elise. And we've also involved in this process several of our community landscape designers who have added good thoughts to this work. So it's all moving forward well. And I should also add that just to define that the first phase of the project will be completed, we anticipate being completed the end of October. And the first phase of our expansion is all of the work of the connector into the 151 building. At that point, the children's room will then move over to 151. That will be fully operational over there. And we will then close off part of the main building in order to work on what will be then conceived as the new teen room and the forum, which is the present children's room. And that should all be finished by the end of February. So at the end of February, it'll be a whole, all done. But the goal is that by the end of October, phase one will be done.
Thank you. We're so lucky to have the two of you, a dynamic duo, to clarify these concerns for us. And for Terry's involvement, we're also very grateful because she's been able to clarify things for us. Thank you, everyone who's attended this. I'm sure we will see everyone at the town meeting, which is this Sunday at 1 o'clock. And look forward to that gathering. And last but not least, again, Elise, thank you. Your calm, deliberative, articulate leadership, not to mention knowledge base, is an asset for all of us. We look forward to seeing you in October for our next First Friday. We don't usually do one in September because beginning of September is always so busy. So we look forward to seeing everyone in October. If you have ideas for a First Friday, something you believe we should be pursuing, please send them to me, and I will be more than happy to forward them to whatever board exists in the coming year. My best wishes to everyone, and thank you. Goodbye.